¿Va a colaborar con la traducción?
Bien, Sebas.
Okay, nice.
It's just a clarification question because I'm not sure that I get exactly if a speaker's meaning is linguistic or mental. I mean, I'm a little bit confused about how to understand the speaker's meaning. This is just a clarification question.
So I think of this speaker's meaning as being indeed mental. And I haven't said much about it, but I sort of assume sort of Bryce's story about speaker's meaning being a matter of what the speaker intends. Or, I mean, people have done and use this expression, has in mind, that sort of thing. And the way I myself try to understand this notion of having in mind is in using the notion of this mental file, at least.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, it's all mental. So it's
More questions from students? Okay, Mike.
So I have a few questions, but I'm just going to restrict myself to a couple. So one of the things that I agree with you that if you try to have a view just like Kaplan and make every part of context dependence just to function in the formal system of Kaplan character and the way he conceives of context, is just going to fail. So in that case, I'm kind of in agreement with you. But you didn't quite frame it that way. You framed it in terms of linguistic rules. So we have sort of a less restrictive view of linguistic rules. It seems to me that maybe we don't have, maybe not such a big difference with your view, but it's still, we have the idea that linguistic rules are going to be something that allow context to come in, that constrain the way in which context gets involved. So, and context can involve speakers' intentions. So I'm quite happy with that. But they just need to restrict the way that context gets involved and to determine the sort of meanings that are allowed. In the way you're putting it, you're saying it's all speaker meaning, except for it's going to be constrained by these presuppositions. So I'm not quite seeing that there's a big difference, or whether you were just trying to criticize that Kaplan's sort of view, or maybe an extended Kaplanian view, in which case I would say, yeah, that's fine, but there's still another way of conceiving of linguistic rules. It's just telling you, yeah, you can pick up these things from context. And one thing that struck me is if you think in terms of complex demonstratives, you get a lot of restrictive information. You can think things like that man next to François, blah 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 blah, and so your speaker intention will be present, so to speak, but it's going to be highly constrained. So it seems to me that there's that when we just focus in the case of I as a pure indexical, and we focus in the case of that, and even in the case of that and this, I think there are going to be some semantic information that's going to constrain. So that's one thing. The other thing is whether really speaker meaning is what determines everything. I'm thinking here of quantifier domain restriction. So in that case, I'm thinking that conversational context might do more of a job there than just and trump speaker's meaning, what the speaker intends. So say we're talking about the wine that's left at my house after a party, right? And we're all sort of saying, well, is it good wine? Is it bad wine? Or whatever. And then someone, say David, says, oh, all the wine has gone off. Now, in that case, I think we are right to sort of say to start discussing something. No, it hasn't gone off. Even if he has in mind the wine that is right here, right next to him, rather than that wine that we have at house. It seems to me that the conversational, that he'll have to do some correction. And that the suggestion, I mean, these are just intuitions, I know, but I think this is a strong intuition that the correction that he makes is because what's trumping, what's determining or constraining the domain of the quantifier is not going to be what David has in mind. but it's going to be the conversational context in that case.
Okay. So the second point may arise again in the Q&A
Yeah.
Okay, let's start with the first one. So I think we do agree, because what you've said is basically the view I've put forward. So that means that, yeah. But so let's say what are the views which I had. There is one view in particular that says that there is some autonomy of linguistic meaning with respect to speaker's meaning when it comes to determining content. And so that means that what the speaker has in mind doesn't count. So, for example, there is this Perry example, or Bowers and Perry example, maybe that even if I'm mad and I believe that I'm Napoleon, if I say I, that will refer to me, not to Napoleon, something like this. There is this sort of argument that's, I think, rather terrible. But anyway, so the view that the determination of content, even in the sort of cases that I have in mind, proceeds in isolation from matters of speaker's meaning, because there is this widespread view that semantic content, at one level, we've got the determination of semantic content by linguistic meaning, it's a matter of rules. And then speaker's intention, speaker's meaning, what the speaker actually means, is something that comes at a later level. After something has been said, then there is the issue, what does the speaker mean by saying this in this context? But the two, and of course, in both cases, we have context dependence. What the speaker means at the second level depends, of course, upon the context, and the content, the semantic content at the first level also depends upon the context. But the idea was that the context dependence, there are two sorts of context dependence. One is very much rule governed, there is this determination thing. And the other one is a matter of speaker's intentions, recognition, things like that. And what I'm saying is that we also have this matter of speaker's meaning, recognition, intention, and so on at the first level when we try to assess content, because the rules won't fix content. And what you're saying is that it's okay if the rules are construed in a more relaxed manner as themselves possibly appealing to this idea of what the speaker has in mind. Yeah. And particularly that will be the case with demonstratives. That will be a case in which we need actually the speaker's intentions, because there is no other way to, or maybe cases like also under specified expression, like John's book, for example. What's the relation between John and the book? There is nothing to tell you except what the speaker means. So yes, so we agree on this, but still, when we are at this point saying that we need, to fix content, we need speaker's meaning, then there are two ways to conceptualize this. And so either we say that there is a linguistic rule in this, but the rule itself has to use the concept of what the speaker means. So the rule would be so that's when stating the linguistic rule, we have to build those pragmatic notions into the rule itself. That's one way. And the other way says, no, we give up the determination basis, we don't maintain that linguistic meaning, linguistic rules determine content. We accept that they don't. And when the content is underspecified, which is the general case, maybe not all cases, but at least the general case, when the content is not specified just in virtue of the linguistic meaning of the expression used, or the whatever may be automatic as well determining content in context, then we appeal to what we have, of course, the speaker's meaning, our knowledge of what the speaker is up to, and that sort of thing. That's the view I was defending. And it's not clear whether you defend that view or the other view that says we need speaker's meaning indeed, but we can phrase or formulate the rules, the linguistic rules, in such a way that they themselves will mention speaker's meaning.
I think it's the fact that the linguistic rules themselves can appeal to speaker's meaning. At least in the case of demonstratives, where the difference, I think, will be in the generalization. That in the case of the linguistic rules, in the view that I like, is the view that leaves open whether it's always speaker's meaning. There might be aspects of context that are going to be required. It might be a conversational context. It might be, so I mean, it's just going to be determined by the linguistic rule, and it depends on the expression.
Right.
In your case, you're sort of saying, oh, speaker's meaning is for, I mean, as I'm understanding the view.
But there is, again, the context of this discussion about determination. What do you mean? There clearly are people who think that in some cases, let's say pure lexical cases, there is real determination of content by the linguistic rule. In this, that's what they call the automatic lexical.
Yeah.
The rule takes over. Speakers meaning have no role to play. There is this rule, it's an objective rule, the language that's been used is, say, English. There are those rules, they determine in context, there are objective aspects of the context that can be ascertained by anybody. And the rule determines content with respect to those contexts, quite irrespective of what the speaker has in mind. So that's what I'm resisting. And but even if that's true for some cases, even if that were true, which I don't believe for some cases, then I would certainly resist the idea of extending this idea of determination, this strong notion of determination, extending it to the demonstratives, with the argument that there is one way of formulating the rules, which will be such that the rule will actually determine content, thus construed. If the rule itself appears to the speaker's meaning, I think it's really cheating. That is, you say the rule determines content, and you preserve that claim just by sort of adding something to the rule, which itself presupposes that there is something else that determines content, namely the speaker's meaning you're getting to. And there is another problem which has to do with this notion of character, the contextual parameters. And the contextual parameter, I agree with Brandon, who has somewhere he says that there is a constraint on the relevant things that could serve as contextual parameters used to fix content. They must be such that they must be independent of the content to be fixed. Any case in which you put as a parameter some aspect of the content itself that's predetermined, say, by speaker's meaning is illegitimate. I agree with that. So there are various reasons why I'm sort of skeptical of this move of putting the appeal to speaker's meaning within the rule. But I can understand that there might be also a version that might be perfectly innocuous. If someone says, actually, I think that's what Kaplan himself would say, because, so if someone were to accept that we have to give up the determination basis anyway, and if someone uses such gerrymandered rule with appeal to speaker's meaning built into, just as a sort of a way of formalizing the things, but without any attempt to defend or save the determination thesis, understood in the strong way that I was talking about earlier, that would be fine with me. Now, when it comes to the continuum that you talked about, you said there are complex demonstratives with very long, so that table, which my grandmother bought, whatever, very long description, but starting with the demonstrative, clearly that's a demonstrative, so the speaker must have in mind a particular table, but the constraint, the linguistic constraint is very detailed and specific. So that supports what I said, that there is a continuum between the demonstrative cases and the pure indexicals, because you may construe the pure indexicals as a case of that sort, in which the presupposition, the linguistic presupposition, is actually so specific, so detailed, that by itself is sufficient to fix it. It would be sufficient to fix the reference. But still, that's compatible with the claim that it's always speaker's meaning, and then there is this particular case in which actually there is sort of redundancy.
Okay, we have a short time.
Sorry,
sorry.
Yeah, I've got the other questions, unless there is a follow-up on this part of the question.
I don't know. Anyone has a, okay.
So the other follow-up on this?
Not anything.
Yes, Mike has another question. That
okay.
So I try to be shorter, actually, yes.
Okay.
So you're saying that there are cases, and that's okay. So maybe there would be another question about that. But, so cases in which the contextual facts, brute contextual facts, objective contextual facts trump the speaker's meaning. The speaker has a certain intention, but it so turns out that the context is such that we don't care about what those intentions are. There's something else that's going to fix content. So I think I have another opportunity for talking about this issue, but let me say just one thing, which is when I said that the intention, so there was this debate about what fixes the reference of the demonstrative. Is it the speaker's intention, or is it just objective facts about the context, like rhymer and all those things? And I'm on the side of the intentionist, but I think that the intentions matter, but the intentions which matter are not the private intentions in the mind of the speaker. Communication is a sort of a collective thing, and what matters is the intention insofar they are revealed or graspable by the hearer. They must be made manifest. So if you don't manage, if you have an intention and you don't manage to make it manifest, make it such that the other will understand your intention, it's true that your intention won't have any effect upon this objective notion of what is said, things that can be shared, or what a reasonable judge would say has been said in this context, if you were apprised of all the facts. So the contextual facts have a big role to play because they do the externalization of the intention, and that's essential. So I don't think that sort of case is necessarily an objection to the view, depending whether, again, a speaker's meaning must be manifested. That's essential.
Okay, we have a short time there, please. One question per capita.
So my question might be a bit similar to mine. I'm not sure. So here's how I like to think about the determination thesis. So yes, literal meaning determines assertory content, literal steps. But of course, very often, a responsible speaker has to shape the context in the right way so that what she says can express a proposition. And there are many examples. I cannot simply say, I have to pick up my Komodo dragon from the airport. I cannot ask you to accommodate that presupposition. First, I have to shape the context in the right way. I have to make sure that we don't take for granted that I have a Komodo dragon, and then I can go ahead and say that. I cannot call someone who is this tall without making sure that the context is such that the standards of tallness are that of a jockey, let's say. Or if David wants to make sure the first personal pronoun refers to himself, first he has to change the context in a certain way. He has to make sure that he's the speaker. That's easy to do, but he has to do something to the context. If I'm going to use a definite description like the cat, first I have to make sure that there's a most salient cat, at least according to the theory I like. And I can do that by pointing or by calling the cat by name. Similar with demonstratives, right? Let's say that the character of a demonstrative like that is the most salient object in the conversation. And in characterizing the character that way, I'm not packing speaker meaning, right? And then the demonstration is just a way of making the given object the most salient one. It's just an action that has that effect. So I think all this is friendly with the determination thesis, right? Certain utterances require a context to have certain characteristics, and a responsible speaker will act in certain ways to ensure that the context has those characteristics. Now, if I understand you correctly, you want to say that it's speaker meaning doing all that work, but the way I like to think about those things is just certain actions that shape the context in the right way. They can be demonstrations, they can be making noises with your mouth, they can be adding presuppositions to the common ground. They're just actions that shape the context in the right way so that an assertion can express an assertory content. So I have the impression that you will think this is an ad hoc way of stating the determination thesis. And I would like to know why you think that.
Yes. So that's again the same issue, right?
Yes. That's very simple.
So for sure, so I agree with what you said about shaping the context. That's basically the same sort of thing that's said about demonstrations. You have certain intention, you have an object in mind, you want to talk about that object. You'd better do something to let the hearer understand what your intention is. And I think that can be generalized. There are all sorts of things that you have to do to make the context proper for the hearer's understanding of your intention. But I believe that those aspects of the context, they play their role in what you would call determining content. The aspects of the context that you will have shaped through your actions and things like that. They only do that role in determining content insofar as they can be taken to reveal your intention in speaking. So if you manipulate, if you have the very same aspects, but you manage to make it the case that it's sort of clear that that's not what the speaker has in mind, that would fail to determine content. So again, I'm not denying that context. There are features of context that play a role which seems to be context determinative, and I'm saying, yes, they have this role with actions or things that you talk about, but only insofar as they make it possible for the hearer to ascribe to the speaker the right intention, the intention that actually drives the utterance. So that's a slight difference of emphasis. And also when you say in the case of the demonstrative, the linguistic meaning is something like the most salient object in the conversation. I object to that. Notions like salience, they are pragmatic notions. So if you have your semantic rules, that's fine, but you've got the semantic rules, you've got the pragmatics. You use the pragmatics for basically doing what you can do with just the semantic rules because there's some slack or whatever. But putting the semantic, the pragmatics into the semantic rule, that seems to me ad hoc, because it seems to me that the only point of this move is to defend, preserve, or protect this determination thesis, which seems to be counterexamples. Plus the thing I said about random, it's a general idea of what should count as a contextual parameter. If we use the capitalization of a character or something like this, then I think we should have constraints on what counts as a legitimate parameter. But I agree with all you said about the various actions, the various things that we have to do to make sure that communication proceeds smoothly. Indeed, it's not enough to just intend. You must make it the case that your peer is able to understand your intentions. That's crucial.
Okay. Pregunto.
Professor, if I understood you, you were explaining that for people like Frege, the assertive force cannot be encoded.
Yes.
That's an important point for logicians, because we want to distinguish between something being as a condition or being actually a premise, that kind of distinction. So how should we interpret something like Frege's assertion bar, when he seems to be encoding, seems to be at a different level, but still it's a graphic way of indicating the assertion force, which he wants to make this differentiation. So how should we interpret that bar?
I think we have to see that as a descriptive device used in some kind of meta-language by the theorists. But when I said that for Frege, force cannot be encoded, I meant in the object language, there is no way in which we can use something as a symbol that will guarantee that the utterance is actually an assertion, because it will be always, as Domet said, always possible to actually subvert, as it were, this by using this symbol in a non-literal way. But so Frege says something like, it's no use adding "it is true that" just to mark that you are certain, because just as P can be used non-seriously without actually assertive force, the same is true about "it is true that P." So it's always possible to pretend that you are certain if you're an actor on the stage or whatever. It will be always, so there is no way, there would be no guarantee from inside the symbols used that those symbols will be used seriously with assertive force. But that doesn't prevent the theorists from having a sort of symbol that enables one to distinguish cases in which a serious assertion is made from cases in which a content is put forward without being asserted, for example. Or maybe also from cases in which you're defining something, which seems still another sort of case. And that's, I think, the sense of the symbol.
Okay, Sebastian.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to ask you about the idea of having something in mind, especially when it has to do with quantifiers. So if I understood you properly, you mentioned that the domain of quantification depends on what the subject has in mind. And then what immediately popped into my mind was trying to build up cases similar to the distinction between being concerned and being about, or your explicit and implicit. So I think, and you can perfectly help me, of cases in which the domain is implicit.
Yes.
And in this case, if I understand the notion of implicit properly, the subject does not have anything in mind about the domain of quantification, in which case, what should be said by the theory?
Okay, so it's absolutely true that, so when I talk about this situation theory framework with this level of the Austinian proposition, with there's something that plays the role of topic situation, what we are talking about, something that we're implicitly referring to. For me, it's something that's implicit, indeed.
So, but implicit.
So indeed, it's what the utterance concerns. And you're saying, so, but I'm saying that it's implicit linguistically. There's nothing in the sentence itself that tells you.
But it might be the case that there is nothing. So sometimes this idea doesn't work only in linguistics. Sorry,
yes, no, I see what you mean. Of course, I see what you mean.
In mind.
So the point is, sort of rephrasing it. So there is this situation theoretic framework in which there is the explicit content on one side, but that's not all of it. We need also this other component, which is the situation we're talking about, and we evaluate the explicit content at that situation. And clearly, the situation in question, it's not itself encoded in the sentence. The sentence only presents the content to be evaluated, and the situation you're talking about is something that's just implicit. But what you're saying is that we find exactly the need for the same distinction between these two components in the mind. So when we have a thought, that's the same, there is the sort of explicit content of the thought, and that's what the thought is about. And that's only implicit. And you're sort of pointing that there is a sort of contradiction between the idea that this situation is something that's implicit even in the mental case, and you
having something in mind.
So does that mean that it's not mentally represented?
So there is a trick. So just making use of your idea, for example. So it can be the manner of representation. What in this case gives you the implicit condition, but in this case it's not clear to me what that would be. Something. So in any case, it's not something in the subject's mind. What is going to make the restriction in the quantification? If we can bring cases like.
No, well, yeah, okay. So that's. Of course, we have to think much.
Yeah,
that's a good point. Much more. But I would say yes, it is something in the subject's mind, but we need to distinguish two components: the things that are explicitly represented and the things to which there is sort of implicit reference. So I would say we have to preserve the idea that there are these two heterogeneous components, but that doesn't mean that the mind, in no way, that it's not something mental in any way. I would certainly deny that the topic situation for a thought, for example, is something that has to be determined by, say, objective contextual facts independent of what's in the speaker's mind. So the sort of case I have in mind are cases in which indeed it's something in the speaker's mind and the thinker's mind that determines what the thinker is thinking about. But that thing would, depending on the case, that might be the mode of the, that's what you thought, the mode of the thought, for example. So I don't know, it's too complicated, so good point. I don't have a great answer, except that I would deny your conclusion that it's not anything mental. I think it is something mental. Okay, Dennis?
So this is basically the conversation we had in the break, and it's very much connected with Maite and Ricardo's. So I think the general worry is you want to say that there's always, not just in many cases, but always, to some extent, it's speaker's meaning that determines the meaning of what's said, very roughly. And we've already seen, the general worry is sometimes we're just in situations where what is meant or said slips out of our hands, so to speak, and it's just determined by factors that are external to us, right? And we've seen a case for quantifiers, we've heard a case for demonstratives, and I want to give you the case that we talked about before, a case for, predicates, if you will, or nouns. And then, first of all, invite you to say a little more to elucidate that reply that you sketched that has something to do with revealing intentions. And also suggest, if I understand it right, why that maybe is over-intellectualizing communication. So the kind of case that I have in mind is the standard externalist, anti-individualist type of case where you have a conversation. A speaker has a completely non-standard conception of sofas. He thinks they're religious artifacts, right? And everybody else just thinks of them as, well, sofas. So, the speaker that I'm thinking about says, well, no, you can't sit on a sofa. That'd be horrible, right? What we want to say is, or what the cases are supposed to suggest is, well, of course, if he took into account his conception of sofas, what he says would be true. But that's not so, right? We want to say he's wrong about this. And that's because, apart from wanting to contribute to the conversation, what he has in mind doesn't matter to what he means. Right? Okay, so that's just one more case. Yeah. So now you say, well, there's something going wrong here. It didn't manage to reveal properly or adequately what he had in mind. So I'm not sure what that's supposed to amount to. I think it couldn't amount to, communicating his conception of sofas, because if that were a condition on communication, then most of our communication wouldn't be happening, because we don't lay open the contents of our minds in that way. And so that would be, I think, a too high demand on conversation. So again, the first question is, so how exactly is it supposed to go in those cases? and isn't presenting. And I think the general impetus of your framework, I kind of like that. But the way you presented it made me worry whether it would lead people to underestimate the role of context and just ignore many other factors that are important.
Okay, so good. So I think that I would be tempted to, again, I would have to think more about it, to treat the two cases differently. So my test case, the quantification, all the one has gone off, where you have something in mind, but if the context is, given the context that your other interpretation should be predominant, I said that in this case, I want to say it's a matter of actually revealing one's intention, but in particular, there is also a connection with the topic situation. I think that very often what determines the relevant domain quantification has to do with what you're talking about, the topic situation. And I think that in that case, the case that Matty described, there is a sort of misunderstanding about what the topic situation is. So I guess the speaker failed to act on the context, as it was suggested that we should do, to make his or her intention graspable. So that's the case that I would handle that way. Your case, the SOFA case, is different. It's absolutely true that you can have someone who uses SOFA in a non-standard manner with certain intentions. And on my view, that's something that I have to acknowledge, because I think that even reference to SOFAs or to anything else proceeds through mental files in the speaker's mind. So that's what's true about the singular reference, and so it's also true for general terms like special terms like that. And so it's really what determines the content of the word SOFA is the mental file in the speaker's mind, and the speaker happens to have a very strange mental file about SOFAs, which are religious things. I fully agree with your intuition that in that case, the speaker has said something about SOFA and something that's wrong. So I wouldn't maintain that, so I accept that there is trunking in that case, but I think that it's still compatible with my view. But again, it's not just a matter of the revealing of intention and so on. So here is how I would treat that case. I think that I talked about presuppositions. So when we deploy mental files, we refer to things. But the way we do it when we do it in linguistic communication, when we deploy mental files, while using certain words that are meant to trigger the opening of similar files in the hearer's mind, and so on and so forth. When we use words of the public language, there is a presupposition that's basically a co-reference presupposition. When you're using a word of the language, like SOFA, you're presupposing that the mental file that you're deploying refers to the same thing as the mental files that all those other people who are talking about SOFAs are deploying when they talk about SOFAs. So there is this presupposition of shared or co-reference or something like this. And in the case in which the guy uses SOFA with a meaning that's radically different from the meaning it has for the other people, this presupposition is violated. And because it is violated, I don't know, so I would be in favor of saying that the speaker hasn't said anything really in that sort of case. Whenever we find this divergence between the mental file in the speaker's mind that's supposed to fit reference and presuppositions, I think that, well, it's not exactly what the status is, but I think that that's the sort of case that I would construe as defective. So I wouldn't simply say that the speaker has managed to say something false about SOFAs. I don't think that's right. It's more like a confusion when you point to someone and you use an expression that clearly doesn't fit that person. It would be something like this.
I don't get the follow-up, sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry, the last question, please.
Me? Okay. I was just wondering whether you would use the topic situations to explain the truth condition shift in Travis cases.
I would like to. But first, Travis cases are, I mean, there may be some heterogeneity among them. So, yeah, I guess cases like the milk in the refrigerator case, that sort of things, yeah, one thing that something about the topic situation might be relevant, presumably. But other cases, I don't think so. There is a guy, Stefano Predelli, has tried at some point to handle the Travis cases in terms of the circumstance of revelation, basically, by saying the content is okay, the content is sort of fits what varies and determines the variation in truth value It's just the situation with respect to which we evaluate the content. And the situation in that case has to be construed as including a sort of counts as function, as McFarlane says somewhere, what counts as cutting or what counts as milk or whatever. And I'm skeptical that this can be done because it's not really the intuitive notion of circumstantial evaluation. That, so I would love it if it was possible to do that. But I don't quite know how to do it for all the cases. But in general, what's right is that I think this stuff about topic situation is the fundamental thing, and that the other aspects should, if we were to try to reduce some aspect to others, I would take that as the primary thing and try to understand as much as possible of the rest, like quantification in terms of that. But I don't have a recipe for turning the Travis cases into cases involving simply a shift in the topic situation. What's clear is that in all those cases, there is a shift in the topic situation, but how that, is that sufficient to actually determine the variation in truth conditions using this sort of Austin situations framework? I'm not sure how that would work.
Okay, Carmen has a 1 minute question, please.
Yes, I was wondering about your view on lexical meaning, because if I got you right, it seems that you wouldn't think that there is any theoretically interesting distinction to be drawn between classical cases of polysemy, where you have genuine independence of meaning, and cases of meaning modulation, which is what you were showing us, I think, and we're calling it polysemy. So I assume you think there's no interesting distinction to draw in there?
Oh, no, there is an interesting distinction. So there is a French linguist, Bernays, who said something like, well, he didn't use the word modulation, but he said that polysemy is crystallized modulation. So the idea is that modulation is a matter of language use, something we do. It doesn't affect meaning. It's an diachrony, of course. You use it enough times in that way, of course, that will affect meaning. But it's something that's really speaker's meaning as dissociated from the meaning of the words you use. But it becomes conventional because people repeat what, if someone has successfully referred to someone as whatever, using a figure of speech, other people might use it as well or use the same mechanisms, therefore that gets conventionalized. As soon as there is conventionalization, it somehow becomes part of the meaning of the expression. It's part of what people know when they know the expression. So it's still modulation, and what's important about the rule, what it shows is that the modulation functions that are at stake, they're still active. Even, it's not that it's totally frozen, it's a matter of difference. No, it's still active. There are creative new senses that can appear and things like that. It's part of the phenomenon of polysemy. So modulation is still active. It's not just crystallized modulation. It's still active, but there is this crystallization, there are these conventional senses, there are all those things at the same time. But I still want to distinguish the cases in which there is convention. And actually myself, when I defended the contextualist position, saying that truth conditions of utterances, what we say in the intuitive sense, are affected by modulation. All the examples I gave were the examples actually of polysemy, like the ATM swallowed my credit card, those examples. And there were people objecting, and that was right, the objection. But all those examples are conventional. That's because they are conventional that they affect the truth condition, the intuitive truth conditions. If they were totally creative, like a metaphor that no one has tried before, then we wouldn't feel that the truth conditions are affected. We would really think that it's a matter of speaker's meaning, it's external to truth condition. I believe that's right. So I think that we have to indeed consider those cases in which it's modulation, still active modulation, but there is an element of conventionalization. And it may be that those are the cases in which, those are the most convincing cases to show that the impact of modulation on language, but there are also limits to what you can show that.
Okay. Well, thanks for being here. Thanks again. Please remember that after the lunchtime, we're having Manuel Rodeiro's talk, Transitional Justice and Socioeconomic Inequality. Okay? Have a nice day. Sebastián.
I'm going to follow up. So first I thought you were
Oh, now, you had a little snack, but it's not lunch.
Yeah.
Mexican lunchtime, Mexican lunches are something to deal with.